Hey, welcome back to the Nom Bros pod with your hosts. I'm John.
I'm Justin. Thanks for tuning in. And we're excited for this one. This is the explanation point on True Detective Season 1, the season finale, Episode 8. Man, it's
Absolutely.
been fun, John. It's been fun covering this, week by week, episode by episode, and we're finally here. I don't know about you. I think a lot of shows start out great, start out unbelievably great, and unfortunately fizzle. They just can't carry that sauce to the end. I don't think this show struggles that with that at all. What do you think of the season finale here?
Yeah, I agree. Definitely don't have that struggle in season one anyway. It really has been fun rewatching these, knowing
Yeah,
that we
man.
were going to do analyses of each episode. I
Yeah.
mean, as we've said, I've watched it a dozen times and I love it more and more every time I watch it. And I've always picked up on more different, things and lines and whatnot, but never as much as I have since we started this series and like talking about each episode. When
Yeah.
you really pay attention to each line of dialogue with the subtitles on, like it's just incredible. I love it. Happy to be at the end of it though as well to come to this conclusion finally, the satisfying conclusion that it provides of
Yeah.
sorts.
Yep.
And yeah, let's just get right into it.
Yeah, sounds good. The episode jumps right in and it introduces us finally formally to the spaghetti monster, Errol Childress.
Yep.
Very disturbing opening. Obviously we've been teased, with Errol Childress throughout the season, particularly with the two lawn mowing scenes. The first one we didn't, we're not able to connect the dots the first time you see it, but to cap the last episode, the two detectives pass him and they make the reveal that this is our guy. Well, that's where we start in this episode. Very disturbing stuff, from the atmosphere to, essentially a split personalities, if you will. I don't know. What do you call it?
Yeah, he's got a lot of issues going on. I think he's a genuine psychopath. We do get introduced to him first thing in the episode. I don't know which route you want to take this here, but I've got a bunch to mention, a bunch of theories and, things to talk about. If you're asking about his personality, though, throughout the first 10 minutes, we're introduced to him. We see him at home with his half sister, who he clearly has relations with. We
Betty.
Betty, we see how he talks. He talks in the third person, he talks to himself. He talks to his deceased father, who he has tied up in the cabin on the property,
With his
um,
mouth sewn
with his
shut.
mouth sewn shut. I've got a couple questions about that, but
Yeah.
before we get there, he's filthy. The house is a wreck. His half sister's a wreck. You can almost smell the filth through the
Mm.
smell-o-vision. It makes me, despite the way he looks and acts, despite the way he lives, despite the way he doesn't take care of himself, he is so comfortable in his own skin, despite
Mm.
all of that, which truly makes him terrifying. Seemingly confident and comfortable in his own skin character we meet in the entire series,
Hmm.
and that's what's truly terrifying. There's no semblance of remorse, guilt, shame. He doesn't have a conscience. It's truly terrifying. He is the epitome of a psychopath, and I don't think that the actor couldn't do a better job. I don't think the writers could have written a better, character arc for him. Just impressed all around with the introduction. What's your
For
take?
for sure. And before yeah, I want to hear what you have to say about all that stuff. But before we get there, just how Childress transitions. I mean, he transitions to what, like a British accent? He transit.
Gregory Peck to
What
kill a
about Gregory
mockingbird.
Peck? He likes children to kill a mockingbird. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, he also no, he also transitions to speaking like a child when he's like, "Tell me about Grandpa." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I mean, just a chilling performance by this actor. We've discussed, other shows he's been in, not to get, too off topic, but like in a bunch of great HBO shows, Boardwalk Empire, one of them. But, just this introduction, it's very chilling. It's all over the place. Like you were saying, you watch the scene and you can smell it. You can picture what's going on over here in this room. You can kind of just put yourself in that environment and really just it scares the shit out of you. So it
It really
really
does.
what a
Yeah.
way to start the season finale. You already know he's just a disgusting, terrible human being. I don't even know if it would be possible to despise him more, but it is. because
Oh, it
his dog.
is.
It is because his dog comes in and he whips a freaking frying pan at it. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So
Sam?
just
Is it Sam?
I can't. I don't know. Come here, old lad. Just switches up once again. He goes from whipping a frying pan at it to, come here, old boy.
And we're gonna
Once
go
again,
back to
just
that dog because I have something to say about that dog at the end of the show.
yeah, man. Yeah, just from start to finish, man, of this opening scene, you just despise this character. He's just a sick fuck.
Yeah,
And
he really is. He really
but
is.
he's their guy. He's their guy, and this show has done such a great job since episode one, laying it out for you, laying it out for Rust and Marty, and they're on his trail.
They are, it's really uneasy to watch. Like it's so like, okay, we're finally at the finale of the series. Here's our guy, but the just the introduction and like everything that we learn about him in a quick 5, 10 minutes is like it's hard to watch. Like it's so uncomfortable and like haunting,
Hmm.
right from the get-go. The episode picks up and he's talking to his dead dad, like you said, with his mouth
Yeah.
sewn shut, and his decaying corpse is sprawled out on a mattress frame and tied to the corner posts of the bed, right? Chained or some shit.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Why did he do that? I have a couple theories that I wrote down, thinking about it. It really leaves it up to the imagination. I think
Hmm.
there's a primary, kind of an established idea of why he's like that. But
Hmm.
what's your take? What's your theory on why the Childress father is deceased, decayed, and tied up in Errol's property?
Well, that's a really good question, and to be honest, I don't have an exact answer. I have three theories though that I'll bring up
Sure.
and throw them back at you. So the first one is that the Yellow King? All right, like is that the Yellow King? Is that the main guy? I don't think it is because I would like to think if the Yellow King is actually a human being, it would be somebody much, much
Much
more
higher.
powerful, much higher in the hierarchy. And last week we were talking a little bit about the idol that they actually have in Carcosa. But
Right.
the first thing that I think of is it the actual Yellow King? Is it Childress's father? The
That's
second
fair.
thing the second thing I have is he just, obsessed? Is it like a shrine? Is he just obsessed with his father? We don't really know much about his father, but we do know that Errol Childress, the green-eared spaghetti monster, is, a bastard through the Tuttle family. So does he just have this long desire to be part of the family, but he knows, he never will be because he's a descendant, he's a bastard? Kind of very similar to characters we've seen in shows like Game of Thrones, where it's like, I'm longing to be a part of this, but I know I never will be. So is that why he's holding on to and
He has such
essentially
admiration for
such
him.
admiration and just
Right.
like putting this corpse on a display and essentially maybe even taking care of it, almost like Norman Bates with Norma Bates, like trying to preserve this corpse. And then the third one I have, is it a sexual thing? Is there something sexual going on there? Because as we know, he's living with his partner slash half sister slash sister. I'm not even sure what the relationship is there, Betty, but we do know obviously that they are involved sexually, and obviously we don't have to talk too much to know that this man Childress is just an absolute sick fuck. Is he
And there was
having,
incest
is he
throughout the family as well.
exactly?
So, yeah.
So is there some type of like Ed Gein thing going on here where he's holding on to the corpse and performing, X, Y, and Z? I don't know. But, to answer your question, those were my three theories. And I can't really decide on one, but those are the three things my mind takes me to. What about yourself?
Yeah, those are all very valid. The first one I thought of was like, was this to get back at him for childhood abuse that he suffered?
Okay.
We know that the scars were inflicted by the father, from Miss Dolores's interview, right?
Sure, yeah.
So, being chained up and your mouth sewn shut, that kind of shows that this had
Mm,
to have happened when he was still alive. Okay, you beat the shit out of me when I was a child. I'm gonna do the same to you when you're old and dilapidated and can't defend yourself anymore. I got
yeah.
that idea, honestly. Like this was a revenge thing. Which makes sense.
It makes,
The
yeah.
mouth is sewn shut and everything. I also had a little bit of a more wild idea that maybe the dad was gonna come clean. and this was done out of fear of being caught. Like, no, you're not going to tell on us, so I'm going to cut your tongue out and sew your mouth shut or whatever. That could be more, out there, like why come clean? Like what there's no real evidence of that whatsoever. It was just a thought I had. A few others, I was like, does he think that he's actually still alive and he's taking care of him? Is he that delusional and sick in the head? He's talking to him,
Yeah.
like he's like, I'll be back tonight after my evening walk or whatever. Like, why
He's
are you
literally
talking?
speaking to him like Norman Bates,
So if
literally.
you, right, exactly. So like if you put him in captivity because you wanted to punish him for the abuse that he did to you when you were a kid and he died, why are you talking to him with such admiration now?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like that kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
counter, there's no like real definitive answer there. That doesn't wouldn't really make sense.
Yep.
So then I was like, well, we know this guy's sick as fuck in the head just from what we see on the property of his premises and what he's done as far as his crimes. Is he just so delusional that he's just doing this to mock his dad and laugh at him in as
Mm.
he's, because he's dead now? Like, did he get off by torturing him himself, through death until he died? And now he just goes in and like he's making a mockery. He knows he's not talking to anybody. He's talking to himself the way he talks to himself in Gregory Peck's voice while watching, the TV or whatever. So just a lot of different theories. Again, I think what's the scariest aspect of it is there's no definitive answer. It leaves it up to the viewer as to why. It could
Which I
be any of
love.
these. I do too. Just
Yeah.
so well done. And yeah,
Anybody who's watching, drop that in the comments. Why do you believe Errol Childress is saving his father Bill's corpse? What do you think and why? But yeah, just if I may to piggyback on what you're saying, man, I just love that they don't provide that answer. It's you and I have talked a few times throughout this series analysis on less is more, and how we enjoy, shows and movies, not really putting it up there on the screen, for you, but allowing your imagination to have, these types of thoughts and then, ultimately these types of discussions, and this is a hell of a way to keep that going in this show and a hell of
absolutely.
a way once again to get this episode started. That's for sure.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely. A great opening 10 minutes. Probably the most impactful of the series. Such shock value to this episode,
Yeah.
in that regard.
Yeah.
But
Terrifying, man.
yep, for sure. After, we finally get to meet Errol and his half sister, Betty, you said,
Betty.
when
Yep.
when they're talking together in the living room and she sits on his lap, she says something to him and he has a quote that I really like read into for the first time. I've got big plans to do today. There will be no flower making. He's like,
Hmm.
my ascension removes me from the disc and the loop. My ascension removes me from the disc and the loop. It sounds very similar to time is a flat circle. The disc and the loop, time is a flat circle. So he's like, my ascension removes me from time and the circle of time. And I like I just think that that's brilliant writing. Like he's clearly saying that time is a flat circle too, just in other words, and that he has plans today for his higher calling that, removes him from the current state of reality. Like he's clearly prepping to do some more bad shit. And maybe it has to do with the little boy that he sees in the school ground when he's painting the school, and the school teacher comes out and she's like, "I can get you a school lunch if you'd like." Honey,
Hmm.
I don't know why. He's the creepiest looking motherfucker. And you're
Dude,
offering him a bagged lunch from the school. Like, talk about putting your kids in danger. Sometimes it's okay to be a little stereotypical if your fucking janitor looks like a serial killer, for Christ's sake. It is.
bro, for sure. Remember last week too, we were talking about the Ledoux cousin and the Toby interviews and just how we spent time talking about being able to envision what these people were talking about. Well, that scene right there with Childress painting and just his
Stare at the kid, and the
stare
kid is
towards the little, towards the kids. Yeah, man, like that is just
it's chilling.
terrifying. It's
It's
chilling,
yeah,
and you look at a scene like that, and you're like, huh, that's what they were talking about last episode.
exactly, exactly.
No.
And it almost looks like he like it like there's anger in his eyes that the kid is staring back at him. Like it's pissing him off and wanting to become more and more increasingly violent in a way. It also like he kind of looks away like he's trying to fight an urge, like he's fighting his propensity for violence and like fantasies or whatever, like just his disturbing, you know what I mean? Like he
Couldn't
kind
agree
of
more.
he
Yeah.
like he wants to fight it, but then he's like, no, this kid's staring back at me, like it's pissing me off, and like now I want to scare him or something. Like it's
You're
just a
absolutely right.
it's
You're
so
absolutely right.
uncomfortable to watch. Like yeah, I don't know. It's just
That's what it is,
uncomfortable as
man.
fuck.
Like he starts off looking at that little boy and you see like anger, come
Yeah.
across him. And then it's like it transitions to like guilt and like shame for having whatever thoughts he's having, and it
And then
happens
it
in a
turns to
split
like
second.
a creepy lust type look in his
Yeah,
face.
man.
It's just gross.
Yeah.
And it's like again,
What
just
a
another
scene.
scene that's like hard to watch.
It really is. Yep. And once again, not to sound like a broken record, unbelievable acting, unbelievable acting, to be able to capture all of those
Oh yeah.
emotions, if you will, with not even saying a word and just standing there on a ladder painting a fucking school.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I just thought that that line that he says, my ascension removes me from the disc in the loop."
Yeah,
It's just so weird and like creepy. And he like speaks in riddles almost, but he's just so comfortable with it. He just accepts it and embraces it, and spits that shit. And it's just bizarre.
and transition us back to Rust and Marty. They are still on that boat with that asshole Steve G.
Jirachi,
Steve
yeah,
Garachi, and they,
yep.
obviously, as we talked about last week, they forced him to watch the Marie Fontenot video, confirming, he helped Sheriff Ted Childress cover up disappearance in '95. And, they ultimately leave him with a threat with Rust's sniper friend, who I love this little add-on. It
I do
turns
too.
out to be the owner of the bar, right?
Yep.
And really, the guy that Cole leaves all of that evidence with, and we'll get to that, at the end of the episode, but saying, "Hey, if something happens to us, make sure to do blah 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 with all this evidence." So I love the relationship there with this guy. We don't see him much. I don't think he has any lines actually in the
He
entire
doesn't.
show,
We
but I
just know
just,
that his son was missing, which
yeah, good
provides
point.
his
Motive, if you
motive
will.
as to why he wants to support the cause, which I love. You know,
Uh,
he's willing to risk it all and lose it all by doing what he does, participating, in the manner that he does. I love it.
That's a great point. That went over my head, but you're absolutely right. And it really, and because I was about to get into like, I love how Cole just has this trusting, loving relationship with this guy who we know absolutely nothing about. But you're right, Cole has such an attachment to this ridiculous case, man, that has just impacted him in so many different ways. And now here's a man who not only lost a kid like Cole, but, lost a kid in a presumed way, which, Cole has been, working on this case for freaking years, man. So I just love that relationship there, and I love that he's this sniper friend. I think
I
that's
do
so
too.
cool.
Probably a war vet, like a Vietnam war vet or
Yeah, man,
something,
for
and
sure.
just nothing to lose. A great little add-on, I guess, if you will.
He is, because we literally know nothing about him. His screen time is maybe a minute the entire show.
Right.
So yeah, just really love that, man. But what do you think? Do you think Cole and Marty get their revenge on Steve G here?
L'chaim, fat ass. I
Yeah,
think
man.
so. It's so
Agreed.
satisfying.
It is. I just love how they tie up all these loose ends for the most part. I just love how, people get theirs, whether
I
it's on screen or off screen.
couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, I don't think that, Garachi, his corruption, like even after watching the video and like seeing how horrific it is firsthand, he still just goes to defend himself after the fact. He's like, I swear it was so and so who told me to do this. I'm
Yeah.
just following orders. And it's like it's no different than earlier in the series when they leave the jail cell of Lang
Yeah, exactly.
and he's like, yeah, fuck him.
Right.
Yeah,
He
he's
was
like,
just worried about his parole,
he
right?
asked about his parole before he asked about the victim. So fuck
Good
him.
point.
It's no different here. Garachi sees that horrific video, doesn't
Yeah,
offer to help, doesn't admit or offer to like join in and try to help the cause. He immediately just
sure.
wants to defend himself. So he's a piece of shit.
Yeah, he
And
absolutely is.
yeah, I wish more corruption like that would come out in the open.
Yep, I agree. But, for the time being, it's definitely
Some justice, some form of.
a good kick in the ass for
Yeah,
him,
yeah, for sure.
especially for Cole, who's been undeservingly getting the shit end of the stick when it comes to,
Treated
his
Rust like
coworkers
right,
and just his
right.
overall involvement on the force. I'm sure this was a good finally like, yeah, like got you motherfucker. You
You
know what I
just
mean?
saw that video too of what happened to the Fontenot girl, and he was more upset about his car's tires getting shot out.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Shows
so
you what
yeah,
type of person he is, right?
fuck that guy.
I got a question for you though. Jump into the next scene, really solving the green ears, which
Yeah,
finally puts them on the final path to solving this particular aspect of the case. We have spent so much time talking about Marty and how his mind is never on the case and how he's never fully committed to the case. Someone like Cole, we brought up examples like Cole's deep undercover with the Iron Crusaders, or even as something as crazy as being able to sit there and watch that whole Marie Fontenot tape.
sure.
Which once again, I couldn't blame Marty at all. I'm sure if you dropped me in that position, I'd be like, no, can't do this. Like that's absolutely crazy. But not saying Cole enjoyed watching the tape, but he had an agenda while watching it, and we all know that. But we have really dissected Cole's full-blown commitment and Marty's half-assedness, if you will. The fact that he puts two and two together with the green ears and it being a fresh green paint job on that house, back in 95 that they were looking at, which then really leads them to opening this whole thing up and pursuing, not just, pursuing, identifying and pursuing Errol Childress. What do you think about that, man? Because we've spent so much time talking about this, and the fact that it's Marty, not Cole, putting that two and two together to lead to X, Y, and Z. What are your thoughts and opinion on that?
I think this is finally showing Marty being a true detective.
Yeah.
We didn't really see, yeah, he took the case serious, episodes 1 through 5, up until, they got their guys, Ledoux and or Reggie and Duval. But as far as like the conspiracy goes, like Marty just looked at Russ like he was crazy the whole time,
Hmm.
and was just way too preoccupied with his own life. Being a detective was just the job. He liked the image that it gave him, the power it gave him. But not once throughout the entire series did he really put his nose to the ground and do any of the hard work like Rust had to do.
Right.
And seeing him actually solve something and like join up with Rust finally and like
Finally.
act like a detective and like solve something,
Yep.
like even Rust is like, fuck you, man. Like, good call on that. You fucking figured something out for a change. It's like he was finally a true detective. If that
It's like
answers your question, I don't,
it does, man. And it's like, something else that we've spent so much time talking about is, Marty's personal life. Like it literally led him to losing everything, to finally give this shit 100%. And here we
yep,
are, and he finally is, and it's interesting to see what he can accomplish when he gives something his 100%. He's
for
over here
sure.
putting that two and two together, and it obviously, leads them to Childress. So I just wanted to bring that up because I found it so interesting and ironic that through all of the kick-ass work, primarily Cole put in both timelines leading up to this, that it was Marty doing that. I thought it was
Absolutely.
funny.
Yep, absolutely. Good question. I like that. Kind of happy for him that he solved something.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. Like, oh, good for you, finally, asshole.
Like
Right?
he made so many bad mistakes in his life and was a shitty husband, a shitty detective, shitty person all around, shitty father.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, to see some redemption for him by the end of it is, good to see, I guess. So yeah, they are gearing up then. They get the information they need from the owner of the house who was painted
Hmm.
green, and they, through tax records, are able to trace the company who painted the house. And sure enough, the woman that they interview who owned the house also talks to the man with the scars, and they're able to
Yes.
trace it back to Errol Childress and his family timeline. how they're
Yep.
related to the Tuttles and everything. And they plan up for their raid, their house raid. One thing that really pisses me off
Mm,
when I rewatched it, Marty meets with the one detective in the diner, and he's like, "We might have something. Is it safe for me to say that if we act on it and it comes out to be true, that you will respond to a call if we make the call?" I hate how that detective is like, "You're speaking in riddles, white man."
hmm
They have no reason not to believe Marty. They thought it was Rust, right? They approach Marty with all this evidence where they're like, "We think Rust is in on it. We think Rust manipulated you." And he still sits there and is like, "No, man, like Rust is a manipulator and he's manipulating you." And like that's just I don't really like that. I feel like that's like my only hiccup with the entire series is like
hmm
I get the storyline and the angle and the drama that it provides. And I guess the first time you watch the series, I can't imagine, watching it live, when it came out in 2012 or 13, whenever it was. Maybe the first time you watch it, you're like, wow, it's the finale. I wonder if Matthew McConaughey really is the Yellow King after all is said and done, and these detectives are right. But like, I just never see it that way. I never did the first time I watched it. And I think it's kind of my only gripe with the entire series, I guess, is even when they're meeting Marty in the diner in the last episode, they're still so gung ho
hmm
against Rust, but yet they know Marty is now working with Rust all
Right.
hours of the night. Like, oh, so now you think Marty must be on it too then. Like it just doesn't really make sense to me. I think it's kind of it that whole theory and angle of the show that once provided drama and suspense, it kind of loses its steam at this point, and you're just like, oh man, like you guys are the worst detectives.
That's what I was just about to say. I think if anything, that just highlights how poor of a detective he is to think
Horrible
that,
detective
Cole
work.
is still the guy and now Marty is potentially involved.
Agreed.
I think it just really highlights he just sucks at his job. Or
Completely inept at their
just kind
job.
of piggybacking on a theory you and I have discussed, is he in on it? And is he, okay, maybe he's not out there in the fields doing all this shit, but is he kind of working under the hierarchy and just following
The cover up
the cover up,
mentality
and
and framing and
exactly.
blackmail and whatnot. Yeah, I could see that. That's a good
Because
point.
one thing I always thought was so interesting was, Cole has really not been wrong about. I don't want to like eat my words here, but what has Cole really been wrong about in this show?
Exactly.
And the
Exactly.
fact that he looks at these two detectives who are interviewing himself, Marty, Maggie, and literally has the idea, I wouldn't be surprised if they're in on it,
Right.
or at least, working, under the people who are in on it. I find that so interesting because once again, this entire show, he's been pointing out who he believes is in on it, his ideas, and everybody shuns him. Nah, shut up. You're wrong, you're paranoid, you're jumping to conclusions, blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, he was right about everything. So I find it very interesting that he made it a point to say, "Hey, these two guys might be in on it." And of course,
Totally.
what did Marty do? He's like, "Yeah, shut up. You're crazy. How would they be in on it?" But if we're following the pattern here, it makes sense
It
because
really
Cole
does.
has not been wrong about anything with this case, and any thoughts or feelings he's been having about a specific person or subject, he's been right about. So,
Great point.
yeah.
Great
Yeah, I
point.
think they either suck at being a detectives or they're just kind of still following that narrative from their bosses. You know what I mean?
That's a great point. I guess I kind of forgot about that, but I could totally see either one of those being the case. Maybe a little of both. So yeah, that pretty much is what leads us to Rust and Marty gunning it for the property of Errol Childress or the Childress plantation, if you will,
Yeah,
estate.
right.
They get there.
Carcosa.
Carcosa, the site of Carcosa. We're finally there. And again, just from start to finish, the tension, the suspense, the drama that unfolds, so
hmm
well done. The score in the background, the visuals, the cinematography, the setting, the murals that are painted on all the dilapidated sheds, just
hmm
creepy.
Love the POV
The
of
POV,
Childress in the shed where he's keeping his father. I believe that's where he is, kind of like looking through those filthy, disgusting windows through the yard, watching, Marty and Russ get out their car, and you don't see him. You just kind of hear his, his breathing, kind of like a Michael Myers POV, from the original Halloween, honestly. But just really adds to that.
And
Adds,
he immediately recognizes him. He doesn't confront them. He
yeah.
stays hidden until he no longer can, I guess. So yeah, Marty approaches the door and talks to Betty.
Hmm.
Rust is scoping it out. Before Marty even knocks on the door, Rust is like, Marty, this is the place.
Hmm.
So guns are drawn. They know what's about to happen. Betty opens the door and she again just is so annoying as a character, but also is just such a great portrayal. Again, from start to finish, not a role in this series is wasted by any
Hmm.
actor or actress. Great acting, but just uncomfortable.
It
Hard
is.
hard to watch.
It is. I love how Marty's holding it down and like trying to be like polite too, like play it off like he's not a cop. Well, who do you live here with then? I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
love how
yeah.
he's like trying to save face and like that's his approach going in, which I don't blame him, of course, but
Sure,
it's just
sure.
so funny, like knowing the agenda they have there. And he's like, oh, who do you live here with? Can I use your telephone? It's pretty funny.
Exactly. And getting back to the dog.
Oh, yeah.
I think the name of the dog is Sam. The dog is barking from the moment she opens the door until
Hmm.
the moment Marty tries to break in the door. It's like a 5 minute conversation, and the dog does not stop barking at all. And
Yeah.
I had this thought today watching it. I was like, is that dog barking because it's yelling for help? It's like it's a cry for help from the moment he can sense, an outsider who's not one of his disgusting inbred incestual, relation owners. Someone normal is knocking on the door and he's just gonna go haywire with his barking, like asking for help. That's kind of how I took it. And then the first moment he books it out the door.
He
It's
does. He
it's
does.
like
Well,
he's trying to escape.
Childress unfortunately kills the dog too, kills
Yep.
Sam.
Kills the
Cole
dog.
passes him, and that's a great point though. He's like, "Get me out of here. Get me the
Yep.
hell out of here. This place is ridiculous."
It's a warning if I ever heard. It's such a concerned bark.
Yeah, he's certainly not being aggressive to
To
Rust and
Marty.
Marty because he hauls ass out of there. Like you said, as soon as that door's open, he's like, "Get me the hell out of here."
Yep.
If
Yep.
he was going to be an aggressive guard watch dog, he would have went right at Marty, right at Cole, but he doesn't. He just
Exactly.
hauls ass
Exactly.
right by him.
You would think these types of villains would have these angry ass pit bulls or something to defend their
Yeah.
property. Nope. They've got a dog who's terrified
Who wants to get the
itself.
hell out of Dodge? Just like
Yeah.
get me the fuck out of here, bro. Yeah, for sure. There's so many things, obviously it's time, Cole follows the dog, does he not? He follows the dog, and that's what takes him to the shed, behind the shed. He does not go in the shed, Cole.
Cole does not
Mar
go in the shed.
Marty goes in, while, before he goes back to the maze of Carcosa, but he follows the dog, and then,
Well, he
you
hears
know,
the dog cry out because the dog gets whacked.
yeah, and that's where he sees the corpse, and then that's when he finally comes face to face from a distance with Childress, who he obviously tells him hands up. He says no, and just hauls ass to Carcosa, which really leads us to the climax of not just the show.
I don't really like that, honestly. If there's one other gripe I have about this episode, it's I don't like that line by Childress. It
What?
just like,
No?
yeah, like I get why it's like just to the point and like, no. And he runs away, but like I think it almost would be creepier if he acted like a Michael Myers and just like didn't respond and turned around and walked away.
Yeah, that would
You
be
know?
creepy too. I don't. When I hear him say no, I mean I could be way off with this, but it made me think like he was in that child mindset, when it was him and Betty at the
Oh,
beginning. He's like, "Tell
wow.
me about Grandpa." It almost sounded like that tone of voice to me,
Like he's
and
running
that's
away from his
it's
abuser
like
as a
he
child or something.
exactly where he's
Yeah,
like,
that's a
"No," and
great
he just hauls ass. You know what I mean? So that's where my mind took me to at least.
That's a
But
great point. You're probably spot on with that. That's really makes sense. I rescind my opinion. If that's true, that's brilliant writing.
yeah, I mean, who knows? I could be way off, but yeah, man. I mean, Carcosa though. this set design, these ancient ruins in Louisiana just kind of overgrown with just bushes and shrubs and, obviously just
Well,
I hate to say I go ahead.
before he even gets into Carcosa, um there's the murals of the naked girls,
Mm,
you know, dancing in the fields with antlers and crowns on. Or
hmm.
just like so eerie and like Blair Witchy or something. Then he approaches Carcosa and you start hearing Errol Childress, calling out, and all of the lines that Errol Childress, is talking about to Rust in Carcosa. I don't know if you've like picked up on any of what he says, but it's pretty creepy and pretty disturbing like stuff. Let's go back inside the house though quick because I have something to say about Marty when he finds Betty up in the bathroom.
Hmm.
He kind of, is looking around the rooms and whatnot, looking for Betty because she goes and hides. Am I wrong? And, when he approaches like the bathroom, bedroom upstairs and opens the door, they've got like 50 of those car air
Yeah, air fresheners.
fresheners hanging
Hmm.
from the ceiling. And like he makes a smell, like a face, like, wow, this room stinks.
Hmm.
What is all over the floor? Because when I watched it today, I was like, wow, are those like bagged up little abortions and fetuses in bags all over the floor? Like, I don't know what it is. I could be completely wrong, but there's clearly shit all over the floor and something foul all over the floor that's not really made known. But why the air fresheners all in that room? Obviously, the whole house stinks, but why in just that room?
Right.
I can't imagine it's just piles of shit. I don't know. I
Hmm.
saw that and I was like, are those fucking fetuses? Are those supposed to be fetuses in bags in on the floor? I mean, throughout the house, there's dolls everywhere and children's clothing and like remnants of previous victims, which is scary as hell as it is. But then like entering that room, seeing that, like I was for the first time, I was like, what are those supposed to be to justify that many car fresheners hanging from the ceiling? Because he finds Betty through that room then in the closet on the floor or whatever, crying and giggling and acting all crazy. So I don't know what your take was, if you ever picked up on that. If
No,
that is what it is, that makes it even more disturbing of a watch, I guess.
oh, yeah, if that's what it is, it makes it very disturbing. I never picked up on that. Obviously, you pick up on the hundreds of air fresheners hanging, which is just once again, you can only imagine the filth. You can only imagine what this room smells like. Something that they actually, I believe, pulled from Seven, not to get too sidetracked there, but when they come across the one victim in Seven, there's a very similar setup with the air fresheners hanging from the ceiling, which I think is cool. But man, if that's right, that just really makes this go even darker, deeper than we already are, man. And if it isn't the fetuses, maybe severed body parts, maybe
Who
they're in,
knows? Yeah, it really could be
it could
anything.
really be anything, man, but if it is that, yeah, that really just intensifies this, to a trillion. We're already at a billion. That just intensifies this whole setting to a trillion as far as just how disgusting and disturbing it truly is.
I just guess I went there because she, earlier in the episode asks Errol, like, you want to make flowers in me? Like
Hmm.
that's how they talk about their relationship is like making flowers together. So like, okay, you make the flowers. What are you doing with the flowers? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, sure.
if that's what it is, I don't know. Again, could be way off. It's pretty repulsive to even discuss, but I just wanted to bring it up.
No, absolutely. I appreciate you bringing it up. Yeah, anybody watching, what do you guys think? It's a great point to bring up. And once again, I mean, it's something that's not, it's not discussed, but, this show does such a good job kind of putting things in the background for you to pick up on. So if there's anybody watching this, what do you guys think? Then we do transition to
Carcosa.
Carcosa and just this ancient ruins, this maze, with the shrubs and the bushes, all these leaves, and really just multiple like shrines and
Yeah.
almost like idols, if you will, or like built up of as disgusting as it is and sounds, like trophies. I mean, the
Yeah,
from, they have little babies like that are like mummified and like wrapped, like hanging in like a bird's nest, or just hundreds, a pile of like hundreds like shoes and children's
sure.
shoes. And it's just such, I mean, talk about Carcosa and them showing you what we've been hearing about since episode one. They don't let the viewer down as far as
It's
building it up and then saying like, oh, this is Carcosa, like, oh wow, this is Carcosa. And yeah, just the set design, the pieces around this place is just fucking horrific, man.
it truly is. And you look at like when Rust is like entering, the camera kind of pans out from like the sky POV
Hmm.
and like shows what Carcosa looks like from, above. And it kind of reminds me of like an old World War II like submarine lookout base or something that you would see
Definitely.
along the coast. In this case, could it be like a hurricane type resistant structure or something? They're in
Good point
Louisiana.
there in
They talk
Louisiana.
about Hurricane Katrina all this time. Or
Definitely.
was it truly built, the structure, by the Tuttle and Childress family
Hmm.
50 to 100 years ago? And
Maybe.
they've been doing their rituals and their practices and their worship here for that many years. And the
Maybe.
reason it's not well kept anymore and it's all overgrown is because Errol Childress is the only one living there and he's a slob. Like
Right.
is it
Right.
just showing such dilapidation and like overgrown shrubbery and whatnot because it hasn't been taken care of? There is evidence because of all the shoes and dolls and whatnot strewn all around that this could have potentially been the site of many sacrifices for the cult over the years.
Dude, that's a great point. And I really don't want to sidetrack us and jump all the way back to the Childress talk. But I mean, you just bringing that question up makes me think of, once again, Childress's father, Bill. Mind you, we're in timeline three now. So
Right.
everything that's happening in timeline one and timeline two, Errol's father is still alive. Like, it's not like he's been dead for like centuries. Like,
Right,
he
right,
looks
right, right.
pretty fresh when they show
Agreed.
him.
Agreed.
So, that's actually a very good point of who is the father to this case, to this cult, if you will. Like, who is he? What's his role? What's his importance? And, now here we are in the present day. Yeah, he's dead, and Carcosa is just overrun. And it's just because how would so many people know what it is if
Yeah.
they weren't going there to do these rituals, if they
Was
weren't
Miss
going there to
Dolores
do their work,
right? If
essentially? Yeah, the
was this
work. Yeah, Miss
always
Dolores brings it up,
Miss
So,
Dolores? Was she a maid or a servant at this plantation mansion
right,
20 or 30 years ago when Errol was younger and uh the father was in charge of that estate? Like
right. Because
they
I
do
can't
all know
picture
what.
them doing all of this shit when it's looking like this.
No, I'm sure it was
You know what
like
I mean?
a fucking a Billy Tuttle looking ministry building. You
Sure.
know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like a
absolutely.
shrine that was, oh, let's go to our cult ritual sacrifice meeting
Right?
tonight.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows Carcosa. I mean, you have
Well,
sub witnesses to like major players talking about it. So
also
if they,
don't forget what, Rust hears as he's searching like these catacombs or whatever, this maze in Carcosa. He hears Errol talking to him.
hmm.
Errol's like taunting him and he said he has a whole line of script. One of the things he says is, "Come inside, little priest.
Yeah,
To your
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Take the bride's path," he says. Take the
yeah.
bride's path? What do you mean the bride's path? You mean some bride has been walking to the right
That's
in one of these hallway corridors back in
people
the
getting married
Pro
there,
well,
like
I'm
literally,
thinking
like
a bride, probably like for a cult like sacrifice, like probably fucking blindfolded wearing antlers, and someone's guiding her down the right path, where she's gonna be slaughtered or some shit. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
just the word selection take the bride's path.
Hmm.
This is Carcosa. And then what he says too is, which is interesting, is what they did to me? What I will do to all the sons and daughters of man.
Exactly.
To your right, little priest.
Despite a lot of the family being dead and gone now, he's still carrying out the legacy of
Sure.
what he dealt with as a kid. He's still exacting his revenge on the innocent and preying on the weak, by doing what he's still doing, regardless of Reggie and Duvall's absence, regardless of Billy Lee Tuttle's absence at this point. And
You blessed Reggie, Dewar, acolytes, witnesses to my journey.
we don't even know who's left in the family still participating in these sacrifices. It could only be Errol at this point, but
Hmm.
I'm not ashamed. Come die with me, little priest.
yeah, it's just fucking crazy. And
Well, since we're talking about it, let me ask you this. I know it's kind of jumping ahead because I
sure,
really want to dive into the vortex and what
I do
Rust
too.
sees. So I
Yeah,
don't want you to think I'm jumping over that completely. We're going to dive to that. But since we're already talking Childress and the shit he's spewing to Cole, he lunges and he attacks Russ initially with the knife. He says to him, "Take off your mask."
Take off your mask.
Which really just stands out to me too. I mean, everything he's spewing is just disturbing and fucking bizarre, but looking at someone like Cole, and he goes to take him out, and that's what he says. I mean, you can analyze that in so many different ways. What my mind takes me to when looking at take off your mask is don't fight it. Everybody's like this. Like this is fucking normal in our world. You know what I mean? Like come to Carcosa, take off your mask and like join us in a way.
hmm,
That's where my mind took me to when he says that.
interesting.
And if he's not talking about the actual behavior of the cult, just kind of the darkness, just kind of transcending into the dark and just his evil mentality. Stop trying to be so good. Stop trying to fix the world and change the world. Like, just let it be. It's a fucked up place. Like, just come to our side and live. You know what I mean? It's just, you can analyze that so many different ways. Where does your mind take you to when he says to Cole, take off your mask?
That's a great analysis in itself. So you could be totally right. I guess for me, how I've always interpreted it is just take off your mask and see what life is all about because you're about to die. Like you're about to
Okay.
enter into the afterlife. Don't go into it with blinders on or expectations. I don't know. If that even makes sense. I just feel like he's prepping him for death and
Okay.
the afterlife, like kind of goes back to what Cole says earlier in the series, where he's like, looking at the crime scene photos of all these deceased people, how he talks about all these people, their faces look like they welcomed death at the time.
Right.
They let go and they weren't resistant to it. They were almost relieved and at peace with it, it looked like,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
would kind of
Actually.
correlate and align with what Errol is telling him here. Take off your mask as he stabs him with a freaking Michael Myers butcher knife, and starts
Hmm.
slicing up his gut.
Yeah,
But I guess that's where I've always kind of thought and where it's taken me. I also read
definitely.
something that it could be a line from like a poem or something. I could be way off on that. I feel like I read something along those lines when I first watched True Detective that he's quoting some kind of 18th century
Sure, maybe, yeah.
poem of some sorts or story. I could be way off on that myself, but I feel like I read that somewhere.
No, and that would, line up. He obviously loves watching his old movies and fucking knows them to a T where he's quoting them. But yeah, once again, anybody watching, comment below. What do you think he meant by that when he says take off your mask? And yeah, I definitely wanted to, jump into this because we've been talking about this shit since, Reggie Ledoux. But, in the center of all this, in the center of the maze of Carcosa, obviously before the attack on Rust, he sees, the massive swirling blue vortex in the ceiling. And, obviously they don't really tell you what it is. It's unclear if it's a supernatural event or like a chemical flashback from his drug running days or just his PTSD, like he's spoken a lot about his PTSD and his vision. So when we are, introduced to this vortex, got another question for you. Where does your mind take you on that? What do you think of that?
So I've probably talked about this now 3 times since we started this series. Right before he sees the vortex, he walks into the opening, right?
Yeah.
And he approaches kind of this deity looking sculpture made of
Mm,
sticks and stones and twigs, and I think there's skulls on it, if I'm not mistaken. There might be some bones in it. And then it's wrapped in like yellow cloth and garment and whatnot. I feel like this is, to me, my interpretation of that in itself is that's their shrine to the Yellow King, this
right.
demonic entity that they worship and sacrifice children, women and children to.
Yeah.
And if I may stray, it kind of reminds me that that little deity looking thing of another movie, The Empty Man.
Mm.
The opening of The Empty Man might be the best opening of a horror movie I've seen in the last 10 years. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah, you told me about that. That's the one, aren't they hiking and the dude falls
Oh,
through or
dude.
some shit, and then they go
Yeah.
back to a cabin and
Well,
he like
yeah,
disappears, right?
he falls into this hole in the Himalaya mountains,
Yeah.
and his brother repels down a rope and finds him sitting cross-legged in front of this
Yeah.
fucking gigantic skeleton with 3 heads and
Jesus.
hands that are this big. Like, it is
It is a good
creepy.
movie. That was a good
It was
recommendation.
real good, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, recommendation for the viewer, The Empty
I
Man.
love
Definitely
hearing you
recommend it.
talk about that though, the idol, if you
Yeah.
will, of this shrine. Because
So,
because you're right, it is draped in yellow cloth, yellow
exactly.
sheet.
That
And
can't be a
obviously
coincidence.
can't be a coincidence.
Can't be a coincidence.
Is the Yellow King just
Some
this
kind of
this
ancient,
altar, this
this
ancient,
ancient
idol, if you
demonic
will?
idol. Right. That's kind of what
Yeah,
I was thinking.
good point.
So as soon as he witnesses that, that's when he looks up over his head and he sees this vortex. And part of me is like he's seeing this vortex as a hallucination because he just figured out the whole Yellow King thing in the case. He put it all together. They worship the Yellow King. They sacrifice women and children to the Yellow King. And now
Hmm.
he's hallucinating what the cult members see when they sacrifice somebody, this vortex, whether that's their heavens or whatever that they're sacrificing somebody to, is Rust just seeing? Because when they approached that church earlier in the series, he saw the birds form the spiral right before he walked in. Is he just seeing this vortex because it kind of like with his drug-induced brain, his PTSD that he has, is his brain telling him this is Carcosa and this is the Yellow King and this is what they're sacrificing people to, this vortex in the sky for the Yellow King. That's
Hmm.
one theory I have. My theory is as he sees this vortex, 5 seconds after that, Errol Childress comes out and stabs him and almost
Exactly.
kills him. And I know I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to say it again. He's in a trance-like state when he's looking at this vortex in the sky, much like Reggie Ledoux was in a trance-like state before Marty comes out and caps him.
Hmm.
Reggie Ledoux is also in that trance-like state talking about black stars and like his head's like kind of like looking up in space, like he's all fucking bewildered and beside himself.
You're right.
What if Reggie Ledoux was seeing that vortex above his head in black stars above his head right before he died?
Hmm.
An episode before that, Rust Cohle is telling those 2 detectives, like, I've been studying these DB photos for weeks and weeks at this point, and every victim I saw, you know what I see? They welcomed it. And he goes into that whole speech about right before death, all mankind will see in that very last nanosecond of taking their last breath on Earth what they were on Earth. And then what you see on their face is that right before death, all humans welcome death and they're at peace. I feel like what Rust is looking at is him seeing what we are or what we were in his own words. I feel like the show is trying to show the viewer what Rust was talking about 5 episodes before this, about what you see right before death, because he has a near-death experience 5 seconds later, almost dies by Errol Childress. So that's always been my take about this. I think it's a brilliant scene. Again, it leaves it up for total interpretation. There's not really a wrong answer, but what do you think? What's your take on it?
Yeah, you're right. It's up for interpretation. There's really not a wrong answer, as you said, but I'd like to piggyback on what you're saying, and I'd say that's what I believe it is. I believe he is looking at time. I believe he's looking at
Yeah.
death, and
Yeah.
because like you said, time is a flat circle, and guess what? The vortex is a flat circle, right? Like it is. That's what it is. Looks, that's what it looks like. So you're right. He is in some type of like calm trance, if you will, as
Right.
Ledoux was, as
Right.
is everybody that Cole talks about, talking about the final, not leading up to the death, but like literally that very last moment before death. They're looking at something, if you will. Obviously, says, they're welcoming it, but there's a peace, across their
Yep.
face, and it's almost like they are looking at something that's okay and that is
Yeah.
welcoming and is warm, which we all, and Cole ends up talking a little bit about his experience through this in the very final episode or excuse me, in the final scene of this episode. But that's truly what I believe it is, based off the discussions you and I have had, based off of this entire analysis we've done episode by episode. I believe that that vortex is time. I believe it
Like it
is death.
represents time and
Yeah,
death,
it's
and
symbolizing the flat circle of time.
which totally
So,
checks out. I totally agree. My only knock on that theory, I guess, even though it's my own thoughts as well, which is kind of disheartening because I think that's a super cool theory, is if that's what they were intending, the makers of the show, people like Reggie Ledoux shouldn't get to go into death with peace on their mind, or like, you know what I mean? Like it kind of is a,
true, true. But if I may, not to cut you off, but remember what they're talking about. It's just everything over and over again. So it's not like he's going off to a paradise or a heaven. He's just being put right back into his shitty
yeah.
ass life when
I
you
guess
think
that's
about it,
my point is I
you
agree,
know?
but like I guess my point is like that is such a horrible way to view life, knowing that some people will just always be perpetual victims if time is a flat circle. Like that is such a pessimistic,
Yeah, you're
almost
right.
nihilistic way of viewing life and reality and the miracle of life, if you will. It's just,
Yeah,
and who knows?
people who live a long, happy life would love to think that, right? But I mean, what about those,
Yeah,
2-year-olds that die of cancer, or you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
just what about those, situations of life? Like, how is that
Yeah,
a good thing
definitely.
at all? I mean, we could have a whole discussion about that, but I dig where you're coming from with that. It would be a very, for like an actor or a fucking billionaire, man, I love this mindset. I'm just gonna keep living my life over and over and over again. But if you look at just other people and other people's experiences on, you know, in life, it's not really a good thing at all, right?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that quote from the Joker in The Dark Knight where he's like,
Which one?
when he holds the pistol up to his own head and puts it in Harvey Dent's hands, and he's like, you know what the funny thing is about
Oh, chaos.
chaos?
The
Yes, it's
interesting
kind of like the
about
chaos
chaos.
theory. It's like
Good.
you know what the funny thing is about chaos is it's
It's
fair.
fair.
So like if time is a flat circle, then it's fair.
Yeah, sure.
Crazy.
But, obviously it's open to interpretation, which once again, that's like a broken record we've said, throughout this show. That's why we love it. It doesn't really
Absolutely.
give the answers for you. It allows fans to have these types of discussions. And, obviously you and I have had plenty of discussions on this. So once again, you guys let us know. What do you think? What is that vortex?
What does that vortex mean?
But, that leads to, really the explanation point of the scene. He attacks Cole. Really, Cole puts up a fight, of course, but he's winning. He's winning,
Yeah.
and he obviously Marty comes in, which I I love how Marty comes in and he just takes a fucking hammer like right to the shoulder.
He goes
Like,
1 for 5 on his shots. Come
I know,
on,
dude.
Marty.
What were we talking about last week? Stormtroopers? I mean, like he's
Stormtroopers and Harry Dunn. He's worse than both of
and
them.
Jack Black from
And Jack Black
Sil
from
Saving
Saving Silver.
Silverman, dude.
Yeah.
So he comes in, he can't hit the side of a barn, and he just takes a hammer right to the chest. But it's so interesting. Once again, he really does save the day.
He does. Yeah.
He saves Cole's life in every way he possibly can in a situation like this, not just by taking out, Childress and putting a bullet in his head before he can finish the job on Cole, but just kind of sitting there
Well,
with
Cole puts the
Cole. And
bullet in his head, technically.
doesn't Marty take him out?
No,
I thought he was going to.
Marty shoots him once, but then he takes the axe to the chest and he falls over. And right as Errol pulls the axe out of Marty's chest, Rust,
Cole takes him out.
right,
You're right.
Rust picks up his pistol and finishes him off. But Marty wasn't there. Rust would have died. So
Yeah.
Marty is, heroic and saves Rust to an extent. But then Rust ends up saving Marty again.
True, true, true. You're right. You're right. It's funny though because he's in way less. Cole is in way worse shape than Marty.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh
the
yeah.
fact that he's kind of able to like crawl over and coddle him and just kind of be there for him, which we come to find out, it transitions to the hospital that Cole did go to a place. Did he die? Did he experience death? And was he revived? I mean, it certainly sounds like that. He's got a lot to say. He
Certainly
tells a lot
claims to it.
about
Yeah.
the warm darkness and, really
Feeling
ultimately how
his
he was disappointed to wake up because he felt the strong love, the strong warmth of his daughter wherever he was, which is such an amazing
monologue.
monologue, man.
Yeah.
He his delivery there is just on point. Very emotional, of course. He's crying. Really the first time we've seen this type of emotion from Cole
Sure.
in the entire show, and it's here in the very last episode. It's almost like he has a little bit of a change of heart from kind of the stuff he's been spewing, if you will, based off of this encounter.
The light is
Having,
winning.
yeah, the
Like
light is winning rather than just the world is
it's all
darkness and it's a
dark. Yeah.
giant gutter in outer space,
Right.
which
Right.
I absolutely love, not to get kind of onto something that has nothing to do with the show, but I love hearing him talk about the light is winning because that's really, in my opinion, the mindset every person should try to have, in their life is, really not trying to. I know it's easier said than done. I know everybody's got their shit and, a lot, life isn't fair. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when life is going to throw its curveballs for sure. But, I just love hearing him talk about looking at the stars rather than dwelling on the darkness. Like, I challenge anybody watching this, if you have a discussion with anybody and they say, and you ask them, look up at night, what do you see? They're going to say, I see stars. Probably, at least. Maybe some people are like darkness, but 9 times out of 10, people are going to say, I see the stars, I see the moon. That's fucking awesome. Like, and it's just such a cool way to try to look at your life
That's a great point. That's a
rather than
great
like
point.
dwelling on the negativity. Why don't you look for the positive stuff?
Look
Look
for the
for the
brightness.
stars.
Yep.
Even though, yeah, the darkness may be overpowering, if you will, but you don't see that when you look up at the sky, though. You
And
see
the
the stars
stars are
first.
just so
So,
much nicer to look at than
yeah,
the
so
darkness.
do that in your life. Look at the positivity, people. You know what I
Great
mean?
point. Great point.
Yeah.
I love that. I also do like how Marty has his little awakening moment with his family in the hospital room as well. His
Yeah,
ex-wife
man.
comes in and
It's a
his
cool
two
scene.
daughters come in and he's so happy to see them and he has a little breakdown of his own,
He
like,
does.
wow, I put these people through hell. I was not a good father, I was not a good husband, and they still showed up all these years later at my bedside when they knew I was
Definitely.
hurting. Not even
Yeah.
on my deathbed. It's not like he was dying. He's fine, technically.
Yeah.
He's really
He's
fine
all right.
compared to Rust. And he tells them that. He's like, I'm fine. I'm gonna be fine. And he still breaks down because I think he has that realization finally that like wow, he went through his entire life just so self-centered and selfish and not knowing who he was as a person, as a man, not ever having a grasp on his ego and his power issues and his masculinity issues. Like now he finally sees it when it's too late, like he doesn't
Definitely.
have his family anymore and he just truly has a breakdown over it. I think that's a really powerful scene. I like that they put that in there. I like that his family came for him and he has that harsh reality, that harsh, kick in the nuts that he finally needed, I guess, if that makes sense.
It does. And yeah, I couldn't agree more, dude. The hospital scenes are great because last episode when we talked about Rust and Marty getting face to face for the first time in the present day and them kind of picking up right where they left off as far as like throwing shit in each other's face and what's you got some fucking sack here, some shit, you know what I mean? It really picks up right here. Marty comes rolling in with a big smile on his face and
With an
Cole's
ice
like
cream or
with
something.
like yeah, like this big cup with it's like a big gulp, honestly, from fucking Dumb and Dumber, but Cole's really just not really in the mood. He was just woken up, which as we come to find out, he wasn't happy to be woken up. He wanted to stay wherever he was. What are you doing here? Why are you here? Blah 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 blah. And finally Marty's like, I just came in. What's your fucking problem? It's just so
Right.
funny to see
Right.
these guys just
Still going
continue
at it.
just still going at it. Doesn't matter where they are, what they're doing, man. They just have a very special relationship, and that scene always makes me laugh.
And then Marty still remembers what kind of cigarettes that Rust
Yeah,
smokes as he's wheeling them
exactly.
out. Just little details like that, these
Yeah,
guys hate each other, but they have such respect for each other too. And they just pushed each other side by side through the most insane case that either of them have probably ever experienced and ever would.
right.
And they just have that mutual respect for each other by the end of the series. Love it. Great
Yeah,
conclusion. Puts a cap on the best series ever made, in my
ever.
opinion. I'll continue to watch it until the day I die.
Hmm.
Probably twice a year, maybe if not more, honestly. It's that fucking good. If you haven't watched it, True Detective season 1. And yeah, that's really all I have to say about it, Justin. Great chat
Man,
on it. And what else? What else do you have for it? We have a minute
nothing,
left.
nothing else. It was just a lot of fun, diving into this. Really appreciate everybody who tuned in. Again, we love the comments. We love hearing your guys' perspective and theory. So please, drop your opinions, drop your thoughts, and couldn't agree more with you, man. Best show ever. Not even fucking close. I will continue to watch it. I might restart it tonight, actually.
I
But
might
with
too.
that being with that being said, it was a lot of fun, and until next time, man.
Yep, we'll pick up next week on Return of the Jedi and something else we got cooking. We don't know yet, but we're cooking it.